Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the 25 Days of Real Christmas, a series where we review some of your old and new holiday favorite films. My name's Kevin.
And I'm John.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Home Alone 3. Alex Pruitt, an 8-year-old living in Chicago, must fend off international spies who seek a top-secret computer chip in his toy car. So, Home Alone 3 has a lot of, craziness around it. The first thing I think I find is the most insane thing is John Hughes wrote this movie. So, for those who don't know, and if we haven't brought this up, John Hughes wrote the first two Home Alone movies among a myriad of classic films that will astound and haunt you at the same time. From Planes, Trains, Automobiles, Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Weird Science. Yeah, this guy made a lot of really, really good movies. He wrote a lot of really good movies. And then he made Home Alone 3. Is weird because this wasn't the movie they were supposed to make. So Home Alone 3 was supposed to be like a sequel with Kevin McCallister returning, Marvin them coming back as well. It didn't happen. From what I understand, Macaulay Culkin retired from acting, or he didn't want to be part of it, whatever the case was. So that was out. And then, Pesci and Daniel Stern didn't want anything to do with it. So they kind of just went, all right, whatever. So they went this route. He rewrote the script, made this movie, and I don't like it.
Yeah, you shouldn't have wrote this script.
There are a few positives, which we'll get into. There are some things I think that were fine, but some things that blow my mind is there's a lot of really big stands for this movie. When I was looking at it, I expected to see universal hate, right? Usually you expect that when you see something that people don't like, especially when we change from one character to another in a beloved series, you expect to see mass hatred for the film. I didn't really see that with this movie. I saw a lot more positive, people talking about this movie than I would have expected. Now, John, I don't know about you, but being a kid of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, do you remember watching this when it first came out, or did you skip it? What's your history with this movie? Because I, for one, I know I watched it, but I think I forgot about it and just kind of moved on. What is your history with this movie, if you have any?
I don't think I watched it till maybe years later when it came out, I
Right.
guess. But I remember it, bits and pieces of it from before, but I've always had the same opinion about it as I do now. The sad part is that this is not the worst Home Alone yet.
Oh, no, not by a long
And
shot.
after watching this one, you just think to yourself, oh, it does.
It does, but we're talking about this one right now. So before we get to melancholy here, talking about these other films, let's go into this one. So the first thing I did notice, rewatching this movie after so many years, because out of all of them, you got to be honest, you only watch the good ones a lot. You don't even watch the mediocre ones often. Usually you watch the best films in a franchise the most often. So 1 and 2 I'm most familiar with. Going back to watch Home Alone 3, it was a refresher, right? I mean, it was something, I haven't seen in a while, so I was kind of interested to see what I thought about it. First thing I noticed is I did like the kid, Alex. Alex Linz, who plays Alex Pruitt in the movie. Overall, I thought he was kind of likable. To be honest, I didn't think he was a terrible actor. I thought he was pretty serviceable as the main protagonist in the film. If you were looking for a suitable replacement for Kevin McCallister, I thought Alex was pretty good for the most part.
You rang. Thirsty? Thanks, Mom.
I thought it was decent for his role.
Yeah, I thought his interactions were fine. He wasn't too Kevin McCallister-y, right? He wasn't super sarcastic and super jokey. He had a little bit of that.
Dad.
Yeah.
Got your tickets?
Yep.
Got your wallet?
Yeah, it's in my pocket.
Where's your pocket?
Yeah. Thank you.
But he was more of I'm the smart 90s kid with all the technology and the crazy pets and...
Look, Doris. If you think that was amusing, wait till you see what I do next.
We'll get into that, I promise. But he wasn't bad. You know, he was likable. Like, he was like an honestly likable kid. I like the idea. It took a risk. I'll give it some props, right? You got to give it a little bit of respect here. It took a risk by breaking off the McCallister storyline. You know, they had to do something fresh. I mean, I even said, if you look back at our previous review, I'm like, all right, well, this family did it again, right? Home Alone 2 was twice is enough. I think if we did it a third time with the kids just left home alone, Child Services was going to be involved, and I think we'd have a whole different kind of movie going on there, because we can't get away with it a third time. So it makes sense to, like, venture off, really. I mean, I know they did have an original plan to have the McCallisters back and the original, you know, the Wet Bandits and all that, but in a way, I'm kind of glad it didn't do that, if that makes any sense. Even though I don't like necessarily what we got, I have to admit, like, taking this change, I think, is a good idea overall.
I would say it's a very interesting way to take on a movie of, like, a kid being home alone.
Well, this is what's interesting, right? So the whole terrorist microchip angle has some potential. I know it's completely silly, but if you look at a lot of movies around this time, like those 90s kind of films, they weren't really off from that, right? This Home Alone kind of sparked this weird trend of where we had kids that were smarter than adults. Like, the adults are just blind to everything, but the kid knows exactly everything that's going on.
It says U.S. Air Force on it, but you have to look under a magnifying glass in order to see it.
Kid, a lot of toys have Air Force written on it. This is a recruiting office, son. We don't handle matters like this.
Can I give you the number on the chip and you can call the right guys?
And it's always the kid's job to resolve the conflict. And this movie was kind of in the same vein of that, so I kind of understand where they were going with it. Like, the other Home Alone movies were Die Hard inspired. This one is too, without a doubt. I mean, especially with the foreign terrorist angle going on, you can't really deny its Die Hard origins.
Peter Beaupre, Earl Unger, Burton Jernigan, and Alice Ribbons. They were ticketed under known aliases, but didn't board the Hong Kong flight. I believe they're still in the U.S., but beyond that, I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to find that chip.
But it's also kind of got like a Rear Window storyline. Like, you know, he's stuck at home with the chicken pox, so it makes sense why the kid's home in the first place. And he's looking out the window and he's seeing things.
Oh my God.
And these parents aren't believing him.
Alex, apologize to the chief and go up to your room.
Excuse me for being a good citizen.
Alex?
There is some merit to this plot. I don't disregard it entirely. Like, if you did another Home Alone where they just forgot him on vacation again, this movie tried to do something a little different. And again, I have to compliment it a little bit. I think they did an okay job with that.
Again, another movie where the cops do a terrible job in these Home Alone franchises.
Yeah, the cops are just
Where
stupid. I don't
They
know
go
what they're
check the
doing.
house, and the people are still in the house.
So, where's the burglar?
There is no burglar. Just a kid homesick from school making false alarms.
How embarrassing.
I mean,
They don't look everywhere.
logic's a huge problem with this one, maybe more so than any of the other ones. The fact that the FBI is involved with a potential terrorist plot and they didn't send cops a little bit earlier to check on what was going on.
Said he found a computer chip in a toy car.
We're going to Chicago.
Okay,
Or they're
movie. Okay.
Or they're
I think the worst offender of logic, and I'm trying not to get too negative, but I'm going to do it anyway. The fact that the parrot was waiting inside a little igloo to light firecrackers on fire to find the bad guy was by far one of the stupidest
gosh.
things I've ever seen in media, I have to say.
Counting down in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Take it.
Double or nothing?
I only have one.
We have ignition. It's showtime.
Just wow.
they picked a remote control car
Damn.
that you could probably buy for $1, and that was the thing that could videotape everything.
Well, the fact that it works so well is another thing. Like, I don't think I ever had a remote control car that could do all that. Like if a hamper of laundry fell on my remote control car, mine probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. That one was like just going through it like no problem.
See ya!
Venturing over like obstacles, and I never had a remote control truck that could do that.
Well,
Not that I can remember, at least. There's a lot of illogic issues with this movie, but before we've totally ventured down that path, other things I liked, I thought the old woman subplot was a nice touch.
You were supposed to deal with the snow promptly, weren't you?
Yes, but
Butts are for ashtrays.
I don't care for excuses. We had an understanding, and you broke it. Your word is worthless.
sorry, that'll be no charge, Mrs. Hess.
So you can tell the neighborhood I stiffed you on a snow removal job?
Mm-mm.
It was a little bit underdeveloped, of course, but I think it was nicer than, you know, the neighbor or the creepy bird lady we had in the last movie. You have to admit that was a little better than that, the creepy bird lady, at least.
Yeah, and I still don't care about this lady.
I didn't care. Again, it's underdeveloped, but
I
it's
think she was
better.
It's really cold outside. You're a pretty tough old bird.
And you're a very sweet young man. I just never took the time to notice.
You're not alone in that.
Last positive, I didn't. First, I'll start with the negative before I go into that positive. I didn't like any of the bad guys in this movie. I didn't like any of them. But the guy who played Unger, I think was probably the best one. He had some of the better comedic touches in this movie. I thought he was probably the funnier one, just because like they're yelling, "Oh, Mr. Unger, go here and do this."
Mr. Unger, what are you doing?
Don't touch the yarn. It's wired. Kid's got the place booby-trapped.
I don't know what it was. I just thought he was like the funnier of the one. He seemed to be like the Daniel Stern of the group.
Hi.
Right? He had like more of like the mannerisms. I felt like he was really into it more than everybody else. The other ones were just kind of blasé, but the guy who played Unger, that was David Thornton. I thought he did fine. He was actually the okay one out of the group, I'd say.
Are you almost done in there?
Don't start with me.
I'll wait.
At the end of the day, what are they? They're just caricatures, right? They're caricatures of terrorists. They're pretty much just rip-offs of Die Hard, right? They're kind of like the Die Hard villains here with like PG Die Hard kid villains. So that's what they are. And they, you know, they do that. If that's what they were going for, they went for it very well. Do I think it was good to be in this movie? Not so much. No, probably shouldn't have happened.
The chip, son. Give me the chip.
And that doesn't belong to you either.
What?
That's not your gun. This is your gun. Gotcha.
Other things, I want to address what you said. Is he really left home alone in this movie? If you really think about it, like, okay, the dad has to go to work, right? He has to take a flight and he has to go to his job. Fine. No issues with that. Brother and sister have to go to school for a few hours. They're going to be back home. Okay, fine. The mother goes to work for like 3 hours, but like you said, it seems like it's like 10 hours or a whole day, and then she like never comes home till like super late. But she's like, oh, I'm going to be back in a couple hours.
It breaks my heart to have to come and go like this. It shouldn't be this way.
It's okay. It's not you. It's the times.
Thanks, hon. You have your beeper?
Yeah?
Great. I'll call every half hour. I'll go online with you and keep the connection open all day. I'll have my laptop with me in all my meetings. We'll be in contact at all times. Plus, I have my cellular and you've got my fax number.
We're wired.
Yeah, then she keeps having all this banter back and forth.
But she always
with her,
comes
like,
home.
Her boss and stuff.
Yeah, but she always comes home is my point. The kid's never really left home alone. Like the other ones, the kid was isolated and by themselves. Kevin McCallister was always isolated by himself, and he didn't have anybody else to turn to. He had no choice. This kid kind of had choices. I really didn't feel like his plight was necessarily that terrible. Like, I know he called the police, and the police weren't going to believe him.
Freeze!
because they thought he was lying and his parents, nobody else was believing him. Eventually somebody would have believed you, kid. You know, laws of averages here would have played into a factor and you would have been fine. It's just, I didn't feel like he was home alone. I didn't feel like he was that desperate for help.
We think he intercepted a top-secret electronic device stolen from a Defense Department contractor by a group of international criminals working for a North Korean terrorist organization.
What else is outlandish is I complained in Home Alone 2 that the traps were getting a little too crazy for my liking. Damn, man. I don't know how many times these people died in this movie.
I got him!
Because they died a lot. The first one being when he got electrocuted. I think that was Unger, actually, that got electrocuted. That guy got, like, fried. And then he farted out lightning.
Mr. Unger.
What the hell? What is this now? Now we're getting come on now. Now we're getting too much. Or when Alice, she gets hit in the head with a friggin' flower pot and then her face falls flat first into like mud. Like she's dead. She's gonna drown in the mud and die. She's unconscious.
Bye, Alice.
Yeah, like, and then he drops the weight on them.
Heads up.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
Ouch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, come on. Like, you know, this movie, it tried to do the thing where it tried to make at least a little more sense where they showed, like, Alex was a smart kid. Right? He was kind of, like, above average. I felt like we actually never got that in Home Alone, at least in the first two. Like, I never saw why Kevin McCallister was smarter than the average kid. In this movie, they tried to make Alex seem like, all right, this kid's kind of smarter. He's above average. He has, like, all these little inventions in his room. That was such a 90s kid thing. Remember all the inventions everybody had? They were trying to go for that, so I get it. But that kid's not putting a 1,000-pound weight on the roof of his house and then dropping it on people. He only had a couple hours to prepare. Like I said, the kid's never really home alone, so he only had a few hours to prepare all these traps. You're telling me in that little amount of time, that kid got all this stuff set up to protect his house?
Wait! Why don't you go fill your commuter cup with yummy hot coffee, and I'll get your coat for you.
Thanks, son. I'll make you a sandwich.
I think what also does it, it's the 90s dressing hurts this movie. And what I mean by that is there's a talking parrot. Oh, look, the kid's got a quirky little talking parrot sidekick.
Think you can drive that?
I think we can handle it.
Gentlemen, start your engines. 360.
The brothers and sisters that are bullies. We're too cool for you, Alex.
The world laughs, Alex.
You've stained the family name.
Yeah, 90s, let's go. The inventions in the room. Yeah, 90s kids, we got inventions. We're ready to do what we gotta do.
Oh, yeah.
Woo, we're cool. It was just a sad symptom of the 90s. Even some of the music that they played.
I don't think I know you. Well, maybe it's time to show you. This is my home.
Like, it was just such 90s garbage, you know? These were like the movies we were getting turned out, like, out of the factory left and right at one point. And, you know, this movie falls to that, unfortunately. Its 90s trappings hurt it a lot. Something was severely missing from this movie, if you didn't notice. We only heard it a little bit here and there, but John Williams' music wasn't in this movie. We only got the Home Alone theme, like, spread, I think, once in the beginning and maybe a little bit at the end. Why couldn't we get John Williams to score this whole movie? That's kind of part of the magic of the first two Home Alone movies, right? Where that score just kind of made you feel like the holiday season and made you feel like Home Alone. Like if they were going to keep it in the same series as that, I think they could have at least kept John Williams. I don't feel like why there was a need to change that necessarily.
Maybe he knew something that we didn't know.
Maybe he did. Which goes to my last complaint. Now, you can argue with me, this is subjective, so keep that in mind as I go into it. This movie's not a Christmas movie. Do you know why it's not a Christmas movie?
Because it doesn't happen on Christmas.
It does not happen on Christmas. It happens, as they say, I believe it's January 8th.
You had a ferry from the airport around 1620 hours, January 8th.
This happens after Christmas. The movie kind of lies to you. It still has dressed up for Christmas, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of people, even around us, usually don't take your Christmas decorations down right after New Year's immediately. Usually it's like a week or sometimes 2 weeks after, you linger a little bit. But this movie, I felt like it was a marketing lie, right? It tried to keep that Christmas dressing on, but say, oh, but we're not a Christmas movie. Haha, got you. Shut the hell up. Then don't be a Home Alone movie. You can argue, oh, it's Home Alone. It was kind of like leading away from Christmas. Even the last one was starting to like kind of go away from that. Yeah, I can see your case, but you kind of market this as a Christmas movie, even in like 3-packs that they sell, which they kind of gone away with that. I don't know if you even noticed that. Now it's a lot of it's just Home Alone 1 and 2 are sold together. They're now starting to even get away from 3. But still, it should be still a Christmas movie. If you're going to call it Home Alone, it's got to keep some kind of essence of the original, which you do. You have the burglars and you have the kid, quote unquote, Home Alone. Christmas is part of that too, and that movie just doesn't have this. I kind of felt bad actually having to review this part of our real Christmas series because it's not really a Christmas movie. We could have actually skipped it over. We probably should have in hindsight, maybe. But I think we're at that point, though, we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give Home Alone 3 a D+.
Alice?
It's not the worst in the series by far. It's not good. I wouldn't even say I hate it necessarily. I think it just got to a point where I started seeing how ridiculous we were getting, and I just didn't enjoy it anymore. The 90s cheese holds it back. Trying to go that too extra length with, the international villains and a microchip and just being silly and not taking place on Christmas, kind of losing the spirit of what Home Alone is, just kind of deterred me away. I can understand if you maybe grew up with this movie and you weren't maybe as affluent with Home Alone 1 and 2. I could see you maybe liking Home Alone 3 a little bit more. So some of you like 90s kids that just grew up with this one and not so much the other two, which I don't know why you would have, but it could happen. I could see some justice to liking Home Alone 3, but if you're looking at it as part of a series, it's no good for me, man. It's a hard pass. John, where do you stand with this film?
I give this movie a good D.
You are dead, kid.
Wow.
Dumb.
That's different.
Hilarious. Terrible. It's not the worst one.
But I liked it better than you. Ouch.
Yes. You enjoyed yourself a little bit more than
Yes,
I
I
did.
did. Something there.
It's very weird. Like, this whole movie, like, I think that it's bad, too. You start to know, like, this is where, like, it ends, but it doesn't end.
No.
And after watching this one, you're just like, I don't really need to see
I don't
the
want to
rest,
see anymore.
'cause I know it only can get worse from here.
Yeah, and I went into this mindset where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take away my knowledge of Home Alone 1 and 2, right? I'm going to ignore I ever saw those, and I'm going to watch this movie, because that's what a reviewer should do. When you're watching a movie, you have to watch it for its merits and what it is. But if I took away even the influence of Home Alone 1 and 2, I think this movie would actually be worse, because I wouldn't be like looking at it a little more fondly with having something to compare it to. Like, the only reason I even give it any pointers in some regard is because it still has like some kind of connection to the other Home Alone and just its purity and essence. But otherwise, not a good movie, man. I mean, the 90s had a lot of stinkers. This is pure evidence of that. So no, sorry. I hate to think, though, like you said, though, it does get a lot worse from here. We have a lot more to go with the Home Alone series, unfortunately. It's going to be a rough ride. But John, where can the people find us at home?
You can find us over on YouTube, The Real Movie Guys on YouTube. Go to our page, like our channel, subscribe. You can also find us over on Twitter, @TheRealMovieGuy on Twitter. Tweet at us, let us know your opinion of this movie. or some of our other Christmas classics that we've done. You can also listen to us on many podcasting platforms, such as...
Yes, for your listening pleasure, we are also available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Overcast, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Casts. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you already are right now, hey, greatly appreciate it. Just search The Real Movie Guys. We should pop right up. Thank you all again so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That guy over there, he's John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Don't forget to tune in all this month of this holiday festivities continue during the 25 days of Real Christmas. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Catch you next time. See you.